We're talking about persuasion, principles of persuasion. Somebody name, what did we talk? Somebody talked about authority. How is authority used in advertising?
Using like a dentist to advertise for toothpaste.
Right, right, exactly. You sort of make somebody appear, instead of using a dentist, a lot of times you're gonna use a handsome guy in a lab coat, right? The same kind of thing applies. You wanna claim some expertise or authority. Social validation, we talked about that. What's the way that social validation is used?
Tip jar.
Canned laughter.
Canned laughter, good. What's a marketing or advertising application?
Actors or actresses promoting products, maybe?
So you're thinking maybe, yeah, so that certainly can be.
The number one strategy.
Yeah, we're number one. Most people use this product. Actors and actresses can also be a form. It's probably easier to think about actors and actresses promoting goods that are outside their domain of expertise. That's probably fits more under authority. So social validation. Oh, scarcity. What's how do we use scarcity in that?
There's only one left.
Right. Yeah. Limited time, one left. Time is ticking away. So that's what we've covered so far. We're on a new principle, which is consistency and commitment. And this is a good one. Stick with your commitments and be consistent. This is something that, when you publicly say something, it's uncomfortable to then act in a manner that is not inconsistent with what you've said publicly, right? With some exceptions. But in general, of course, everybody's prone to hypocrisies on some level, but, if you stand up and announce that let's say you announce how concerned you are about the poor, and then if you snub the poor, right, then that's gonna create some tension, right? You talk about how important it is to tell the truth, and then you lie. It feels uncomfortable. Psychologists have a name for this, and dissonance, right? Cognitive dissonance, where when your behaviors and actions are out of sync, it creates some tension, some psychic tension. And in general, people want to stick with their commitments and be consistent. That's the heuristic. This can be distorted in lots of ways and twisted. You say, let's take, I think of a kind of a weird cause. Let's say, I don't know, I hope this doesn't offend anybody. Let's take UFOs. You've got I know a couple people who are all in with the UFO thing. So if you wanted to get somebody to believe in UFOs, or how would you go about doing that? Matt, you might be a UFO guy. This might be a terrible example, but.
I don't know, maybe one way is to just say like the sheer amount of galaxies and stars and planets that are out there and try to show them the potential and possibilities in terms of just sheer numbers.
Good. So exactly. So what it's Antonio, right? So what Antonio talked about is kind of what you might consider kind of the standard way to persuade people, which is you begin with arguments, and then eventually you're going to get them to change their behavior.
Couldn't you just take them to UFO shows all over, like consistently? That way they're going to these UFO shows to be proving that it's done. So they're either doing something that they don't believe in, or believe in something they're not doing.
So you're one step ahead of me, but that's exactly where I'm going, which is when there's tension between, if you want to persuade somebody to do something, kind of the way we typically think about things is that your behaviors come from your beliefs, but it's at least as often the case that it goes the other direction. So what does that mean? Is that it? Say that?
Your beliefs come from your behaviors.
Your
So
beliefs-
if you're doing it, you're gonna believe it.
Exactly. So a couple examples of this. So this is an experiment that they did on college students back in the 70s, and this has become kind of famous as an experiment. What they did was they say you divide the class into two groups. They had two groups in the study, and at the time, this was in the 60s. Fidel Castro was sort of the great threat to the United States, and so what they did was they had half of the class write an essay. They were assigned to write an essay taking the side of Fidel Castro. Right, so they were assigned to do that. And then once everybody had either written an essay about Castro or not, control condition. This is the Castro side over here. This is the control side over here. Then everybody after that said, now report your actual attitude, positive or negative, towards Fidel Castro. What do you think they found?
He's actually positive.
Who?
This side actually started becoming positive about him.
Exactly. So there was a difference between their actual reported attitudes towards Fidel Castro, where this group became more positive about Fidel Castro than this group. So the question is why?
It's kind of like,
Amelie?
it's kind of like when you do a debate and you have to take a side that you don't actually probably believe in, but then you find really many things, hey, this is kind of true about this side, or like good about this side, so in that case, they saw, hey, okay, this and this are advantages about his side, and you kind of believe it because you're doing it.
So what you're describing is a real effect, but I think what you're talking about is slightly different, because if you're preparing for a debate, you're gathering information that can help change your mind. But if you're just assigned to write an essay, there's no new information. The only thing that changes is what you did in the prior 8 or 10 minutes.
I'm trying to remember the term for it. I can't remember the term, but the more you experience something, the more you see it every day, you become more and more favorable to it. There's a term for it.
You're thinking about,
They talk about it in marketing a lot.
there's a fancy word for that. It's on-
Proclivity.
Yeah, there we go.
Yeah.
So what we're talking about here is the idea that the attitudes follow behavior. And that if you want to get somebody to believe in something, get them to behave in a manner that's consistent with that, and then their attitudes follow, right? So if you want, and I'll give you a couple more examples of this where, talk about Chinese brainwashing during the Korean War, when U.S. prisoners were captured, they were interrogated by the Chinese, who had a very sophisticated way for breaking U.S. soldiers, which was very simple, was to get them to perform small actions consistent with what the Chinese wanted them to believe. So they would get them to, the first step might be to get them to sign a confession or something like that, right? So you sign something, sign a confession, and then you've got them moving, you've got the behavior moving in the direction that you want them to. And when you have a gap between behavior and attitude, you can't undo behavior that you've done. So the thing that moves is the only thing that can move, which is your attitudes, right? And so they found that they got several Americans to fully and completely repudiate, captured American soldiers, sort of the American lifestyle by using this technique, getting them to do small acts that were consistent with what the Chinese want, and then they sort of, their beliefs followed their behaviors. This is common in cults, and so if any of you are aspiring cult leaders, see a few of you up there. right?
Happens a lot in the military too, right?
What's that?
It happens a lot in the military too, right? Like,
Oh.
you have someone telling you consistently what you need to do when you need to do it, and then it kind of becomes like second nature. For example, once you get out of boot camp, you'll see people walking in stride together, unintentionally, but they just like, because they've been doing it for so long, they kind of just automatically do it. It's kind of weird. In the military, I think it's kind of the same way, like you're exposed to little things consistently and then you kind of internalize it.
Yeah, no, this works, this can work for what people might consider kind of noble ends or less noble ends, right? But the idea, and the principle is the same, like if you want somebody to believe, to fight for their country, get them to sacrifice for their country, and then, right, and that's, then the attitudes follow, the behaviors. And so I was talking about cults, right? Some cults will ask you to sign over all the money that you have, right? Do they start out with that? That's a terrible way to start your cult out, right? You wanna start off by doing what? Small, yeah, get people to commit small amounts, right? And then eventually down the road, you can ask for everything. But the idea is that, again, attitudes follow behaviors, and there's a couple of really common techniques that are used to get compliance that follow this idea of consistency or commitment. The first one is foot in the door. I assume some of you were taking notes, probably want to star this one. This one will show up on your test a couple times. So the idea is the first step is to get people's compliance with a small step. Sign a petition. Then the next step is to increase the stakes and ask them for something larger. I'll describe an experiment that was kind of the first to uncover this idea. What they did was they had people go around with small little yellow signs that you would hang in your car that said "drive friendly." And they asked people if they would hang those signs in their cars. It's not a big request, and most people said yes. And they came back a week later with big ass yard signs. And they asked the same thing, can we put this drive friendly sign in your yard? So imagine you go down whatever street you live on, your side of the street, they ask that you're first asked to put up the small little car sign, and then a week later, people come back and ask you to put on your side of the street, put the big drive-friendly sign, yard sign. Whereas on the other side of the street, they begin with the big yard sign. What do you think the differences would be?
Your side's a lot more, makes sense.
Right, yeah, if you just, and talk through that, why though?
Because it's like kind of like once you've already started it, like you're gonna think like, well, I mean, like I was willing to put it onto my car, so I might as well just put it on my yard. Where like the other side would be like, you guys are just asking too much for me, I'm just not gonna listen to them. Because I haven't already started anything, so there's no need to start it. But people are more willing to like do more and more once you've already started, I guess.
Yeah, it's kind of what it sounds like. You get your foot in the door, right, and then the rest of you will follow. And so in the study, that's what they found. When people had first been asked about the small yard sign, if you said yes to that, the idea is when they show up with the big yard sign, you infer your attitude about it based on your behavior. So obviously I'm somebody who cares about people driving friendly because I have this little sign in my car, and therefore the answer to your question is yes, I will put this big sign in my yard, right? So this is pretty common in terms of persuasion. You get people to agree to a small request, and then you can escalate. Anyone have an experience with this? No? Yes?
think there's always like the people that want to sign up your email, and then they're like, oh, we're not gonna harass you or anything, and then you sign up, and then they send you an email, and then if you respond to that email, then it's like fair game for as much advertising as they wanna send you. But if you don't respond to that first email, then they just leave you alone.
Yeah, that's good. So here's another, yeah, that made me think of another move that you see online, which is, you wanna find you can't find the price unless
Sign your email.
you sign in with your email or
You add it to cart.
you add it to your cart, isn't that? Right? You put it in your cart, that's getting the foot in the door, right? That's getting you kind of moving in the direction of purchasing. And that's a good example of foot in the door. You get people to take an action on behalf of a purchase, and that's kind of, that first move is the toughest one. And then the ones after that are easier. That's foot in the door. Lowball is, has anyone heard of this term before, lowball?
Yeah.
You have. So here's where you get an agreement to a specific arrangement. In this case, we'll say, buy a car. And once you've agreed to things, then you alter the agreement. So you see this recently with,
Car sales.
oh, car salesman is sort of kind of infamous for that. You agree to a price and then it's like, oh, we're gonna charge you dealer's fees and a paperwork processing fee and stuff like this that, right, you sort of thought you had an agreement on a price, but then that agreement gets changed. That's a good example of lowball. You see this in, with gym memberships too now, where they'll advertise a price, $19.95 a month or whatever. And then there's, what's the fee that they like?
It's maintenance.
Yeah, maintenance fee.
To ensure that you're not gonna cancel early or whatever, it's $50.
Yeah, imagine buying a loaf of bread, and then they're like, oh, we have to maintain our ovens, so we're gonna charge you a maintenance fee that's on top of whatever you agree, right? It's ridiculous. That's a good example of lowball, right? Any other examples of lowball? Say that again?
Cable companies?
Okay,
So,
yeah, yeah.
So you come in with, let's say, $50 a month for 6 months, and then they'll up to your price after that.
Oh, yeah, yeah. Yeah, that always bothers me, because I feel like that, the thing that Zito's talking about is where the cable companies or Dish Network or whatever will say, they'll give you an introductory price for the first year, and don't even mention what it's gonna be for the next year. I feel like that's just taking advantage of people who are not curious and maybe not that smart.
I just have a question. So, when a consumer buys from a consumer, so something similar to a KSL, would the term lowballing also apply if somebody, let's say somebody's listed a bike for like $100. You're like, I really want this bike, but I'm gonna offer like $60, so they're gonna devalue it, and then you meet in between. Is that the same?
That's that's kind of standard this is on the seller side.
Okay.
Right, where the idea is, to lowball, you have to kind of get a commitment to a specific product, and the idea of lowball is to get somebody to move in the direction of buying it.
Okay.
Right, and once they're doing that, then you change the agreement.
Okay.
I feel like Amazon does that with their add-on items, as you can put it in your cart, and then you want to check out and says, oh, you can only buy it if you have something in your cart for like $20.
Yeah, so then you end up with way more stuff than you want. Can you remind me of your name?
Roberto,
Okay.
can you apply that to like tuition for colleges? Like they say that it's $13,000 in tuition and whatnot, but then they're like, oh, but these hidden student fees.
Student fees, yeah.
Class fees,
Yeah.
instructor fee, life fee.
Instructor fee. Life fee. I wish.
Online study.
Yeah, oh, yeah, oh, independent studies, there's an extra charge, online studies, there's an extra charge.
Saves
Yeah.
you money when you're not on campus, but then you get charged extra.
Yeah, yeah, no, those are all totally fair.
What is Timothy's paper?
I don't know. I try to know as little as possible about what goes on outside my classroom. So I have no answer.
Deniability.
I'd say Verizon rates, like Verizon, when you buy a cell phone, they're like, this is how much the phone is, but what's the tack on your case, what's the tack on chargers, what's the tack on.
Yeah, so this is another good example is, you know, our cell phone contracts. You'll get a commitment to a price on a, you know, $49.95 a month or whatever. And then there's always all these kind of additional fees that go, so you have to pay extra for like 911 access or something when you buy a cell phone, stuff like that. They always add those on after. Though that's lowball. Bait and switch is similar, but knowing the difference between bait and switch and lowball is important. So bait and switch, I'll give you an example and then we'll talk about the difference. You spur the target to take a course of action. So you might say, you might advertise a low price on the stereo. And then when people show up, you say, that kind of sucks. Don't waste your time on that one. This is the one that you want. So again, in all of these, the idea is consistency and commitment and getting people kind of committed to a course of action. And once they're committed to a course of action, you make a change that benefits you. Now, there's kind of a key difference between lowball and bait and switch. Anyone pick up on what the difference is?
It's a whole different product, right, with the bait and switch.
That's exactly it.
Yeah.
Yeah. So this is, you're gonna wanna know the difference between these two, and the key as far as remembering the difference is the word switch, right? You switch the product with bait and switch. Lowball, it's the same product, different price, or different price. Bait and switch, it's, you get people to commit to a course of action, such as buying a stereo or a car, and then you switch the stereo or car.
Isn't that mostly illegal?
So there are some requirements as far as like what you have to have a certain number in stock because of exactly this kind of thing. So it used to be common to advertise like on Black Friday,
Yeah, Walmart.
TVs for a certain price, an incredibly low price. People show up eager to buy a TV, but they had one or two in stock. They're gone. They've got other models that are more expensive there. But since you've taken the initiative, if they've kind of got the hook in, you're gonna end up buying something. So that's why they have requirements for the amount of stock that you keep on hand, it's exactly for that reason. All right, foot in the door, low ball, bait, switch. Next one is labeling. And whereas these are all kind of similar, this one is a little different, although it also follows consistency and commitment. This is where you tell people that they have a certain trait, and then you ask them to behave consistently with that trait. So you want somebody, so you tell people that they are, that they're generous, then you ask them for money. You tell a professor that he's super lenient and easygoing, and then you ask for an extension, right? And the idea is people want to behave consistently, right? And so you've assigned them a trait, and people want to behave consistently with that trait. So these all fit consistency and commitment. Any questions before we move on?
Yeah, are there any non-shiesty ways to sell things early?
Yeah. I mean, honestly, I think as far as, this is all kind of manipulative, but I think, you know, the stuff, when people are really happy with something, it's when they feel like they get a good value. And it doesn't necessarily mean it's low price, it just means that what you paid for, you feel like is worth what you paid for. And I think that businesses, most of them, actually try to achieve that, actually want people to feel like their dollars spent were worthwhile. And so as far as what's the sort of what's the most kind of on the up and up way of selling something, I think value. You give people something for a fair price. And there are lots of companies, I think, that do that. And this doesn't necessarily mean it's low cost, right? So one example, like, you know, some shoes are expensive. I wear Asics when I'm running because my ankles hurt if I wear anything that's not a really nice shoe. And so it's expensive, it's $120, but I feel okay paying that because I feel like I get $120 worth of shoe out of it. It's kind of a long answer to your question.
Wouldn't Nike be labeling without being like a jerk because they're like labeling you as athletic, and then they sell you all this athletic wear?
Well, I kind of argue that you're labeling yourself as athletic when you buy Nike. All right, next principle is reciprocity. When somebody does you a favor, you should repay it. This isn't something that's particular to Americans. This is something that you see all around the world. In Cialdini's book that he wrote on this, on persuasion forever ago, he mentioned that when Italy invaded Ethiopia in like 1930s, maybe 1935 or so, that Mexico provided a lot of diplomatic aid to Ethiopia. That was 1935, and then like 50 years later, Mexico had a big earthquake, about 1985. And at that same time, Ethiopia was experiencing droughts and famine, but Ethiopia actually came to the aid of Mexico. And it's because they remembered this, there's this, you know, deep in human nature is this idea that when somebody does something kind for you, that you owe them that kindness in return. So that's one example. And then, like I said, this is very common in human nature to do that. But this can also be kind of twisted, right, for purposes of getting people. This is not the worst example of this, but you know, you see the free car wash. Say yeah. So what's the expectation?
Donations or tips.
Yeah. Yeah, we did. I did a free car wash for a family whose child had cancer, and we, you know, trying to raise money for it. You have to be pretty awful to get your car washed and then just drive off. Right? Most people kind of understand that when somebody washes your car, even if it says free, that you chip in a few bucks, right? So the free car washes, so free sampling, right? This works for two reasons. The one is you get to taste it, and presumably you like the taste, you're gonna be more likely to buy it. But it works the other way too. It works as with respect to this this principle, which is somebody gives you free food, there's an obligation a little bit on your part to buy something, right? So you do feel a little bit of pressure as you're taking, you know, handfuls of food to do something in return for that person.
Is that kind of the same as like when major companies get involved in community events or whatnot, like when Don helped save baby penguins or something, and there was like a commercial for 8 years where he was like saving a little baby penguin, and now I can't see a Don still
Yeah.
picking up penguins, and we're like, oh, hey, they saved them, I should buy this Don, so is that not the same thing? Is that
Oh, I think so. I think that's what a lot of kind of good PR is about, is kind of creating a little bit of an obligation on the other end, that, yeah, you know, this, yeah, Don did that, Pepsi, didn't they had a campaign, it was like Refresh or Renew or something, and it was all about charity. Yeah, I think that fits. Two kind of specific examples of reciprocity. There's door in the face. This one's a little bit counterintuitive and possibly even borderline tricky, but the idea is you present the target with a large request, something that you expect them to deny. Would you be willing to donate $100 to the Policemen's Association? To which you say, no, thanks. Then you back down to a smaller request, which would be what?
5.
Yeah. Or maybe 20. Yeah, anything you can would be a great one, right? So so this is reciprocity, because what you're doing is you're saying, I've asked you for something and you've said no. So I'm going to back down from my position of asking you for $100 and instead ask you for anything. And what's the expectation for you?
Okay, well, that's not too bad.
You're gonna back down from your position too and agree, right? So the way it's reciprocity is, I'll back down and presenting kind of the expectation that the other person will back down, right? So again, the idea of door in the face is, the first step is to get turned down.
I think the point is also that you put the high mind in your mind, or in someone's mind, and then you just reduce it. Because if you have this in mind, $100, wow, that's a lot, and then you just minimize it, it's always working, it doesn't matter where.
That's, what you're talking about is called anchoring. And
Yeah,
what-
exactly.
Yeah, so we're gonna talk plenty about anchoring, but that's a great example of anchoring, where once a specific price is mentioned, that's sort of the reference point. And so when you think about a $100 donation, then like a $25 donation seems a lot more reasonable.
I think a lot with this too is wording, because here it says, would you be willing to, and then the next one says, surely you'd be willing to.
Right, yeah, so, yeah, and this is in keeping with the idea of reciprocity. I back down, so obviously you're gonna back down. All right, so this, kids might have a sense for this. Mom, can we get tattoos? No. Can we drive the car? No. Can we have some ice cream? You're weird, but effective. So this is door in the face, asking for things you know aren't gonna happen, and then you back down and then you get, it's easier to get a yes that way. Unfair exchanges, you do something, do somebody a favor, and then the next step is to ask them for a favor. That's way out of balance with what you did for them. Professor Powell covered one of my classes once. His wife was going into surgery and asked me if I could cover his class, and I did. Like a hero. And then I left the country for a couple weeks, and I cashed in on that favor, way out of balance with what I did for him. I covered one class for him one day, and he covered 2 classes for 2 days, total of 4 classes. Totally out of balance. Wasn't actually thinking this as I was doing it, but that's kind of what ended up happening. So we're on principle 6. Last one is friendship and liking. If a friend asks for a favor, it's good to say yes. So this is pretty common. Salespeople, we talked about this kind of first off, one of the first things we talked about when we talked about persuasion. Salespeople act, there's a friendliness, right? You don't wanna go in there as a salesperson offensive or abrasive. You want to create some kind of comfortable, friendly relationship. And the idea is that, people all around the world, people treat their friends differently than they treat other people. And so you want to create kind of temporary sense of friendship. And so this can be exploited in lots of different ways. You see this, with this principle in mind, kind of how do you see this ad?
It's welcoming. Like, it looks like they want you to come jump in the truck too.
Yeah, it's like this sort of promises friendship in a way. Lots of ads do this where, there's kind of the promise of friendship implied in using their product, right? These guys all wear J. Crew, and you'll have friends too if you wear J. Crew. That rhymes. Creating a sense of similarity, this works really well as far as getting people to like you. People like other people who are like them, even with the most trivial kinds of similarities. In studies, they found that and they manipulate this experimentally, but if you lead somebody to believe that you have a birthday in the same month, you will treat that person better simply based on the fact that you have a birthday in the same month. In another study, they randomly assigned people hats, red or blue. People with the same color hat started to prefer other people with the same color hats. It takes very, very little for people to create a sense of preference for people who are similar than them. Also, kind of along the lines of friendship and liking is physical attractiveness. People like people who are attractive. So you see this in advertising a lot. All else equal, you're gonna go with somebody who's attractive. People wanna be friends with attractive people. I did a study at Florida State that was a fun, cool study. And what we did was we got about 50 people and we said, you have 10 seconds to introduce yourself, and we filmed their introduction. Then we showed those introductions, those 10-second introductions to hundreds of people, and we said, how much do you want to be friends with this person, right? So based on nothing other than what you can say in 10 seconds. And what do you think we found?
Everyone's attractive, everyone wants to be friends.
Yeah, and so this works for same gender, right? So it's not purely kind of a sexual attraction thing, because attractive men men want to be men have a preference for having attractive friends. Women have a preference for having attractive friends. And so that was by far and away the number one thing that we found was people want to be friends with attractive people. We looked at a bunch of other character traits too. That was what we were really interested in. Extroversion and a few other traits. But we had to first take into account attractiveness because that was the biggest predictor. One study, they looked at heart association, fundraisers, attractive fundraisers got 45% more donations. In one study, they had student workers do this. They had this kind of standard spiel that everybody said as they were asking other students for donations. But they made one change to this kind of memorized spiel that everybody gave, which was to say, I'm a student too, as part of kind of your pitch. And that doubled donations, right? So you create that sense of similarity. I'm a student too, and then it's like that you've got something in common, and people, that creates a sense of liking, and then people are gonna be more likely to make a donation. Physical contact, so in one study they had, they observed servers, and servers, the day of the study, they averaged 12%, that's not great. It's pretty bad, actually. But they found that when people were touched twice, that it was 17%. When you touch somebody, that creates kind of a sense of a friendship, right? That there's sort of a closeness there. And so touching customers, that affects how much people are willing to tip. And my hunch is that this worked absolutely not at all on probably most people, and then for a handful of people, it doubled or tripled their tip. That's my hunch. I don't know the facts, but that would be my guess as to what happened. This is also, this kind of sense of friendship and liking, this is also why funny advertising works. It creates a sense of a kind of a positive association with a product or brand. And show you a couple of funny advertising.
Hello, ladies. Look at your man. Now back to me. Now back to your man. Now back to me. Sadly, he isn't me. But if he stopped using lady-scented body wash and switched to Old Spice, he could smell like he's me. Look down. Back up. Where are you? You're on a boat with the man your man could smell it. What's in your hand? Back at me. I have it. It's an oyster with 2 tickets to that thing you love. Look again. The tickets are now diamond. Anything is possible when your man smells like Old Spice and not a lady. I'm on a horse.
Getting a Bud Light isn't always easy. That's why we've created the Bud Light Extender Arms, state-of-the-art technology that's easy to use. Fresh, smooth, real. Bud Light, it's all here.
You left Rusty alone in your apartment?
It's okay, I got on one of those shock collars.
Oh, that's so cruel.
No, it's part of his training.
Can I get you a Bud Light? My roommate's got some in the fridge.
Thanks, Rusty.
Cool.
Fresh, smooth, Bud Light.
So what's up? You wanna hang in or you wanna go?
It's all here.
Reebok to send us Terry Tate, some people thought we were crazy. But I'm a firm believer in paradigm breaking, outside the box thinking. Hey, buddy.
Break was over 15 minutes ago, Max!
And since Terry's been with us, our productivity has gone up 46%. We're getting more from our employees than ever before.
You know you need a cover sheet on your TPS reports, Richard! That ain't new, baby!
Hey, Terry.
Hey, Janice!
But what's really interesting is that Terry's become part of the culture family. He fits right in here.
That's a long distance call, Doug!
To be honest, I wish Reebok sent us 10 Terry Tates.
Woman, it's game time! It's pain time, baby! Woo!
All right, a little dated, but funny nonetheless. So the idea is that funny commercials can create a sense of kind of a friendship or liking towards a brand, and that's one of Cialdini's principles of persuasion. So that's we've hit his 6 principles of persuasion. Your